Ice keeps moving. What begins near the poles does not stay near the poles. White surfaces spread farther across the planet, covering more ground with each advance. At first, that might seem like the kind of change Earth can absorb. Seasons change, climate shifts, conditions recover. But something different starts happening.
Every new layer of ice reflects more sunlight back into space. Areas that once absorbed warmth now reject it. The planet loses energy. Temperatures fall, and the ice advances again. The expansion creates the cooling. The cooling creates more expansion. Instead of slowing the change, the system begins pushing it forward. The very process that normally helps regulate conditions is now working in the opposite direction. Each advance makes the next advance easier. Each colder period creates the conditions for an even colder one. The threat is no longer a harsh climate or a long winter. The threat is a feedback loop that keeps strengthening itself. And once that process is underway, a far more unsettling possibility appears.
If the planet keeps becoming colder because it is already cold, what is left to stop the ice from spreading everywhere? The frozen regions stop looking temporary. Regions that once absorbed sunlight begin disappearing beneath expanding sheets of white. Areas that might have slowed the cooling are steadily being replaced by surfaces that reinforce it. The change is no longer confined to isolated regions. The frozen world is growing larger, and with every expansion, the remaining unfrozen areas lose ground. What once looked like a difficult climate shift now begins to resemble something far more dangerous. A system that is learning how to remain frozen. If that trend continues long enough, an unsettling possibility emerges. The ice may not stop because conditions improve. It may stop only when there is almost nowhere left to spread. The advance of the ice seems to leave fewer and fewer ways out. Then, a detail that seemed irrelevant begins to matter. Deep below the ice, volcanic activity continues. Heat remains underground. Material continues moving from Earth's interior toward the surface. The frozen world above appears locked in place, but the planet itself has not stopped working. That observation changes the picture. For the first time, a possibility emerges that the frozen state may not be completely permanent. The mechanism remains slow, almost unimaginably slow. Yet, it suggests the system may still contain a way back. If the planet still possesses a way back, the crisis suddenly looks less final than it did before, which raises an uncomfortable question. If recovery was always possible, why does this period still appear among the most extreme climate crises Earth ever faced? The answer begins to emerge when the evidence points somewhere much worse. The ice did not stop near the poles. Signs preserved in ancient rocks suggest glaciers may have reached regions near the tropics. Places expected to remain warm appear caught in the same frozen system. The reassuring picture begins to break apart. A path back may have existed, but it was not nearby. The ice does not retreat quickly. It does not crack apart in a sudden collapse. For ages, beyond any human timescale, the frozen surface remains in place. But one process never stops. The frozen surface appears unchanged, yet the atmosphere is not. Volcanoes continue releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Under normal conditions, weathering would help remove it. Now, with much of the planet locked beneath widespread ice, that pathway is largely shut down. The gas keeps accumulating, year after year, age after age. The change is invisible at first.
The frozen world still looks permanent. The ice still dominates the surface. The crisis still appears unwinnable. Then, the balance begins to shift.
The growing warming pressure does not defeat a weak freeze.
It slowly overwhelms an extraordinarily powerful one. The process that once pushed the planet deeper into the freeze now begins pulling it back out. In the end, Earth escapes because one planetary process kept operating long enough to reverse the lock. For millions of years, the frozen state remained easier to maintain than to escape. The escape route existed. The problem was surviving long enough to reach it.
The planet did not avoid disaster because the freeze was weak.
It survived because recovery arrived before the frozen state became permanent.